begun.
You're listening to 89.5 FM Columbia. This is Women's Issues, Women's Voices, a feminist talk show with a rotating group of hosts who cover a wide range of interests from the perspective of women. We offer a platform for women to share their stories, discuss political issues, teach about healing, and share their talents. The Goddess Hour is a collaboration between two of the Women's Issues, Women's Voices programmers, Vic Day and Corey Flaker-Fraser. This is aired usually on the last Friday of the month. In these episodes, we explore the divine feminine archetypes through embodiment, meditation, stories, and more. We're continuing to be inspired by TurtleWoman and bringing it more into our physical space through this episode on June 25th, 2021.
Yes.
And creating
It'll be our first time doing it on our Friday time slot.
Yes.
Yeah. So happy summer solstice, everyone.
Happy summer solstice.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in this episode, we'll be creating a space, talking about continuing our conversation from last time about how to create a space for turtles in our yards and just creating more nurturing environments in our yards and in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is Vic, if you want to recognize our voice. That was Corey who brought us in. And yeah, I'm just really have been excited. If you haven't caught us the last couple of times, we started out our first podcast. Well, it's not a podcast yet, but someday it will be. Our first show is available on YouTube. And if you want to get that link, you can always write to us at WIWV@KOPN.org. The second show is not on YouTube, unfortunately, but it's okay. But we talked about TurtleWoman and about that archetype. And then in the second show, we talked more about the nervous system. But this time we really wanted to talk about turtles as a real living part of our ecosystems and how they exist or don't exist, can't exist in this human world that we've made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to say this briefly to spur some thought. A yard is more than a yard. It's a habitat. And the land is alive. And so are the things that live in it, obviously. But like, I don't think it's often thought of our yard, like our yard is something we mow and our yard is something we weed, pull weeds out of. Like our yard is always something that we think we need to control.
Yeah, and in some places there are actual ordinances that restrict people from doing anything but that, maintaining a certain type of grass, a certain height of grass, and the idea of anything wild being nurtured in the spaces around our homes is often discouraged. And it's often discouraged. And so we're not advocating that your yard should be an untended place in which anything gets to grow and anything can live in there, because there are reasons for this tending of the spaces around our homes. However, culturally, we tend to impose. Like developers come in, they scrape off, they take all the trees away, they scrape off all the topsoil, right? And they add lawn. They literally, and I can remember one time many years ago, I learned about lawn because I was part of a activist movement where we built a shanty on the quad of my college. And when we took the shanty down the day before graduation, there was this big empty spot where the shanty had been and protesting apartheid. And then within 3 hours, there was lawn. Right? They had come in and rolled these carpets of this beautiful, perfect grass, right, out, and very controlled.
Sod.
Yeah, sod, right? You know, but these, you know, very controlled, very green. It looked like you couldn't tell that there had ever been anything that had happened there. And we're talking about like the health of our, we were talking before, like transforming yards from yards into habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe part of that is gardens. But even that, I think people think of gardening as like coming in, tilling, creating linear rows, right? Or having very, you know, an area that's very, you plant a certain thing here, a certain thing here, a certain thing here. And we're talking about even incorporating that as an idea of habitat. Am I right? That's what you're, yeah. Okay, so you're going to share something.
Yeah, let me read this to you. So I'll show everyone listening on YouTube the cover. It's called The Garden Awakening, and it's by Mary Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
And this excerpt is Restoring Health to Your Land. In order to understand the method for reestablishing the health of your land, you may have to shift your perspective for a moment. I keep repeating that land is alive. This may be obvious on a physical level with the myriads of teeming creatures on and beneath its surface when the land is healthy. But what I mean is alive in the same way that you and I are alive, that is conscious, capable of being damaged, of feeling pain, love, anger, excitement, sadness, and grief, of falling sick and becoming well again. This I know to be true at the core of my being. All I can do is share it with you. The earth is made up of diverse pieces of land with distinctive physical and emotional characteristics in the same way that individual people have unique personalities. No single piece of land is the same as the next. Each garden will need a unique strategy for healing, and only its guardian will know how to create that plan. The goal is for you to connect with your garden and work with it on a deep level. You cannot do this if you hand over responsibility to someone else. That is why I had to stop designing gardens for people who would not make the effort to form a connection with their land. The first step in co-creating a garden with nature involves working to heal the land. We are mirrors for the land, and it is a mirror for us. So healing the land leads us towards our own restoration, back to our true selves. This method of healing does not create changes overnight. There are no instant transformations, no miracles to be expected. It is a slow and steady process, but if we are determined and our intention is to keep reaching for the light, we will get there eventually. If we allow the light to shine on all the dark places in our lives, if we have the courage to face our fears, face adversity with courage and strength, then recovery and growth will take place. It is the same with the land. It takes time. But you will see positive results if you work to acknowledge, release, and repair the damage. The blockages will be dissolved, and the land's original vibrant and abundant self will emerge. Once again, this is by Mary Reynolds, a book by Mary Reynolds called The Garden Awakening. And it's a big book. It goes on to talk about how to heal the land. But that's just kind of that page really made me start connecting with my own garden in a different way.
Yeah, I love that language. I love the idea that you know, that land is alive, and that us living on a certain piece of land, we're we're there. We can be there as the guardian and protector, not as like the, the landlord, or, the lord over the land, right?
The caregiver.
Right. Yeah, that's when we were talking about earlier. It's like, the caretaker in the conventional sense of like big estates was one who came in and took care of the gardens in the way that the gentry wanted it, the caretaker. But they weren't a caregiver. They weren't the guardian of the land. They didn't tend the land and allow it, which is, that difference between imposing and allowing. They didn't allow it to give what was natural. There's just a little local lore. Noah Earl has a great song about the pawpaw, these pawpaw trees that when he was a kid were tended by this farmer, and they would pick the pawpaws. And then when the man died, he didn't have any children, and somebody from the city came and bought the land and cut them all down because they were in the way, and never realized that this was like harvest. This was part of what was feeding the whole ecosystem. Right. And that brings us back to, so we started this conversation out. How do you create, wherever you might live, a space where turtle could feel at home, could show up, and why would you want it? Right. So
because turtles are awesome.
Yes, they are. And from a spiritual perspective, and we've been talking, just how turtles represent like going slower in life and really letting yourself stay low and slow. But then it's like they're vicious predators to things like slugs and grubs. And I don't know if the larva of what are those bugs that Japanese beetles. That they are like one of the most. They're an example of like the ultimate omnivore. They will eat just about anything, worms to whatever. But a lot of those, if you are a gardener at all, especially with all the rain we had in the spring, like slugs were a real problem. Snails were a real problem. Those kind of things can really destroy your plants. Turtle is like your own little private, jump, 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 jump. Right. And so there's this really practical piece for why you would want them. Also, I feel like that they say that like, wow, you have a really diverse habitat here in your yard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the moss, like all the things growing in my yard. I don't, sometimes I manage and I cut back some things that are overgrowing too much, or if there's more than one thing, I tend to it, and I nurture the land by like trying to create balance in that. But I don't want a monoculture.
Well, so the first thing is that turtles need shade. They if your yard is flat and grass all the way from the street to the sidewalk to the edge of your house, you're not going to attract turtle. Because turtles, one of the articles I read, they used the idea that like the idea of a turtle heaven includes shady woods where leaf litter has been able to collect some downed branches that they can get down in the leaf litter to be protected and sleep. And that that they also like to be able to get up on the branches to be able to get sun, to bask in the sun. So having a corner of your yard where you allow the leaf, even if you rake, allowing the leaf litter to collect is one component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like if you spray pesticides on your yard, then that takes care of the bugs, and that's not going to be a place where a turtle really wants to be because they're hungry and they need bugs to grow, to live.
Right. So another so a piece of like literal habitat is not spraying chemicals on your yard and leaving, not cleaning your yard to the point that there's no leaf litter. Allowing for there to be a place where they can get in the shade. But yeah, no, if you spray, that's going to deter them. One, they don't like the chemicals, and two, you've killed off all of their
food supply.
Why would they come there, right? Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking in this like, for someone who's listening who lives in a neighborhood, a development, like a subdivision type area, right? That they're going, okay, what can I start doing to change? And it might take a while. I mean, it's not like something you can impose. You cannot force, like you can't say, I'm going to set this up this year and turtles will come.
Right? Yeah, just like the book said, it takes years to nurture the land to be healthy again. It can take, and it's tending. It's consistent tending and nurturing.
And so I'm thinking of, like we just said, so don't spray, leaving leaf litter and letting it have an area, at least an area in your yard where it's what's that called? It's not leaf mold, that's not, but the stuff after the leaves are decomposing underneath a pile of leaves. I can't think of what that's called. My brain is.
Are you thinking of compost?
Well, but when it's just leaf, it's got a different name. It's like a place between. You know what I'm talking about? It's like what the forest floor is made of.
I want to say detritus.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But so say that's the next step. You're not spraying's the first. The next step.
I think it's detritus.
Huh. Okay. So the leaves will stay there. They will naturally attract earthworms that will come up and start breaking down the leaves. The earthworms are going to attract turtles because that's one of the things that they like to munch on. I'm trying to think of, there's a name, and you may know from your book, like where you create little shallow pools, like you buy like shallow bowls and make sure there's water in them. Not enough that it like attracts mosquitoes, but just little, there's a name for it in your garden. I can't think, I wish I could have my daughter here with me.
I don't know the name of those either.
And you put rocks in them, and then you make sure when you're watering, it's something, you're always adding water to that. So having a water source will attract not just turtles, but birds, butterflies, bees, because especially in a day like today, if you go out in the morning and the evening and you're always keeping a water supply there, eventually the animals know, and animals and insects know that there's a water supply, a clean water supply. So then the next thing is, so if you start planting, composting was the next thing. Like I'm trying to think, what are the layers that people can do so they don't feel like they have to do this all at once, because this is turtle. So, going at your own pace. Composting. Is there something that you want to say about?
Oh, I
in
love
town,
composting.
in town composting?
Uh, well, I guess not raking as much
Mm-hmm.
could be, or like saving a little spot in your yard for the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you have compost, so you bring your food out, or
Yeah.
you put your like garden
Mhm.
garden debris in there.
Right.
So
Like the
it and mixing
non-seed
it
stuff,
in,
right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
mixing it in with the leaves so that
Which,
it breaks down
yeah,
and it creates this like,
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
rich environment for
Right.
my compost is contained, so it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really attract turtles so much.
Right.
But then
Yeah.
when the compost is ready and I put it on
Mhm.
my plants, that creates like
Yeah.
more nourishment for
Right.
the soil and more
Yeah.
nourishment for the plants, which, oh, and there are all those little pill bugs,
Uh-huh.
those roly
Yes.
poly bugs in the
Right.
compost. So like
Yeah.
that, oh, the turtles
Yeah.
really love those.
Yeah. So, and what it says in this article is that turtles will dig out from any place they've overwintered, and in late March or April. Then they're active until October. And that what basically they're doing all spring and summer is, it says, I love this sentence. They say they forage, gain weight, bump literally into mates, and lay eggs. And then they'll spend their nights concealed in a shallow depression in the soil or the leaf litter. And that's also where they'll hibernate, right? And
Mhm.
that they actually then, in that time, if you happen to be in the woods, in a wooded area, I just like, I love this picture that they're blazing trails underneath, like just in that layer, that first little layer of that leaf, the forest floor, they're coming
Yeah,
in, yeah.
blazing. That's not
Blazing
something I
trails.
would really think of a turtle doing, but
Yeah.
I
So,
like that.
um, and so then just a real brief is, and planting native plants, finding out about what is native to Missouri, especially plants that really grow in the shade, create like wild ginger has that
Oh,
beautiful big
that's
leaf,
my favorite. They're kind of
right?
shaped like hearts.
Yeah, right. And so these are all things that the more you have the cover, you may not even see that you have turtle, but you'll
Yeah.
attract them the more you have those kind of things around your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before our last show, a
Mm-hmm.
few weeks ago, we were talking about turtles, and I was thinking, gosh, I haven't seen any in our yard. And then right after that show,
Mm-hmm.
we saw two out there, and my daughter really got excited about where they lived and their home. And we have
Mm-hmm.
lots of leaves everywhere. So we probably have more turtles than I really know about.
Yeah, and I've mentioned that before too. We have a garden in our front yard in our house in town. And we have gardener snakes and we have tree frogs, but I have yet to have seen a turtle. And only once have I seen a toad in the 8 years. I'm sure they're all there. There's a lot happening. I mean, whenever I run into, one of the gardener snakes, it always reminds me that there is life happening underneath and behind and in all those places that, I've created these wonderful sanctuary by adding all of these native plantings that just come back every year.
Yeah.
So we are just about to our time to end our first half. So I know we talking about moss before, but I think we're going to have to do it in the second half.
Yeah.
Okay. So, folks, we're still gonna be talking about plants, but we're gonna shift a little to talk about two plants that we feel like really sort of are part of are connected with the world of turtle, because turtle lives both on land and in water, needs them both, but cannot stay in one or the other exclusively. And so the plants that we're going to talk about is moss and the lotus flower. So we hope you'll come back in the second half when we start talking about these wonderful, wonderful, ancient, prehistoric
Mhm.
plants that live in our world.